Nathan Collins stood alone on the deserted platform of Blackmore Station. The air was thick with fog, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. Time seemed to stand still, with only the faint flicker of ancient lampposts breaking the oppressive darkness. The wooden beams of the platform creaked beneath his boots, and the distant, eerie hoot of an owl echoed through the silence. He tightened his grip on his camera, feeling an inexplicable chill seep into his bones. Despite the stillness, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His eyes darted around, searching the shadows for any signs of life. The station had been abandoned for decades, following a catastrophic train derailment that claimed dozens of lives. Some said the spirits of the victims never left. A sudden, cold breeze brushed past him, and with it came a whisper, a faint, sorrowful voice that seemed to drift on the wind. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest as he turned toward the source, but there was nothing there, just the dense wall of fog. "Is someone there?" he called out, his voice barely more than a whisper. Only silence answered him. Nathan took a deep breath and stepped forward cautiously, each step echoing unnaturally in the stillness. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the old platform. His camera hung from his neck, ready to capture anything unusual. He had come here seeking a story, but now he wasn't so sure he wanted to find one. Suddenly, a faint light appeared in the distance, just beyond the tracks. It flickered like a dying flame, moving slowly toward him. Nathan squinted, trying to make sense of it. The light seemed to sway, almost as if someone were carrying an old lantern. Curiosity outweighed his fear. He lifted his camera and snapped a picture. The flash momentarily illuminated the fog, but when it faded, the light was gone. Confused, Nathan checked the photo on his camera's screen. What he saw made his blood run cold, a shadowy figure, barely discernible, standing on the tracks, watching him. Nathan's heart raced as he stared at the photo on his camera's screen. His breath caught in his throat. There, on the tracks, stood the figure, its form barely visible amidst the thick fog. The outline was indistinct, but its presence felt undeniable, as though it were a shadow cast from another time. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, piercing through the darkness. A cold shiver ran down Nathan's spine. He instinctively took another picture, but when he glanced at the screen, the figure had moved closer. It was no longer standing on the tracks but now appeared to be walking toward him. Panic surged through Nathan's chest. He quickly turned around, scanning the platform for any sign of life, but there was nothing, just the oppressive silence and the endless fog. Nathan's pulse hammered in his ears as he turned around, but when he did, the figure was gone. He whipped his head left and right, searching for any trace of it, but there was nothing, just the endless stretch of the empty platform and the oppressive fog. Was he imagining things? His mind raced, trying to rationalize what he had seen, but every fiber of his being screamed that something was terribly wrong. The temperature dropped suddenly, and Nathan's breath became visible in the air. He wrapped his arms around himself, trying to calm his nerves, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. The train tracks in front of him seemed to stretch on forever, and the old platform groaned as if it were alive. A faint whisper echoed in the distance, growing louder until it was unmistakable. Someone was calling his name. "Nathan, Nathan, come closer." Frozen in place, Nathan listened intently to the voice that called his name. The whisper was faint but unmistakable. It felt as though it was coming from all around him, echoing through the fog and the platform. He was no longer alone. "Who's there?" Nathan called out, his voice shaking. The whisper stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural groan that reverberated through the ground beneath him. The platform creaked loudly, as though something, or someone, was moving beneath the floorboards. Nathan stepped back, his camera now hanging loosely around his neck as he tried to make sense of the bizarre situation. Then, without warning, the lights of the platform flickered violently, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. In the dim light, Nathan saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure materialized in front of him. The ghostly apparition was wearing old-fashioned clothes, with pale, hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through him. Its mouth moved, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the ghost let out a blood-curdling scream, and Nathan stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. He fell to the ground, his camera slipping from his grasp. But the ghost did not advance, its hollow eyes locked onto Nathan, as though it were waiting for something. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan's breath came in ragged gasps as he scrambled backward, his heart pounding violently in his chest. He tried to speak, to shout, but his voice caught in his throat. The figure in front of him didn't move. It simply stood there, unmoving, its eyes boring into him with an intensity that felt like it was reaching inside him, probing his very soul. With every passing second, the cold around him deepened, sinking into his bones. The whisper returned, growing louder this time, as if the fog itself was speaking to him. "You cannot leave, Nathan, you cannot escape." In a panic, Nathan lunged for his camera, which had fallen to the ground. His hands trembled as he picked it up, desperate to document this nightmare, desperate for some proof of what was happening. He aimed the camera at the ghost, pressing the shutter button as his fingers shook. But instead of a photo, the camera emitted an eerie, distorted sound, and the screen blinked briefly before going black. Nathan's lungs burned as he ran, his mind clouded with fear and confusion. He had to get out. He had to escape this place, this nightmare. He could hear the echo of footsteps behind him, as if the ghost was right on his heels, following him through the fog. Each step felt like it was taking him deeper into a dark abyss, but he couldn't stop. His eyes flicked over his shoulder, searching for any sign of the figure. There was nothing. Suddenly, the station doors appeared in the distance, their light a faint beacon of hope in the sea of darkness. He pushed himself harder, forcing his legs to move faster, desperate to reach the exit. But just as he was about to reach the doors, something grabbed him by the shoulder, yanking him back. When Nathan awoke, he was lying on the cold, hard platform, his body aching and bruised. His mind was foggy, disoriented from the terrifying experience. But something was different now. The station was still empty, but it felt different. The atmosphere had changed, it was lighter, less oppressive. Nathan slowly got to his feet, his legs shaking beneath him. His camera was still lying on the ground next to him, but when he looked at it, the screen had returned to normal, as though nothing had happened. He reached for the camera, his hands trembling, and checked the photos. The last picture he had taken was a blurry mess, but it was the one before that made his stomach drop. The photo showed the ghost standing over him, but this time, the ghost's face had changed. Its expression was no longer angry or threatening, it was serene, almost peaceful. Nathan felt a sense of awe and confusion. He had witnessed something no one would ever believe, and yet the evidence was clear in the photos he held in his hands. The ghost had been tormenting him, but now it seemed to have found peace. The feeling of being followed had stopped, and the oppressive air around the station had lifted. He slowly made his way to the station doors, pausing for a moment to take one last look at the platform. As he stepped outside, the night sky seemed clearer, the stars shining brightly. The fog had lifted completely, and the weight on his shoulders was gone. Nathan had survived the night. He had experienced something that would change him forever, But as the doors closed behind him, he knew that the haunted train station was no longer a place of terror, it was a place of release, of closure. The ghost had found its rest, and so had he.